Nightreign just had its first of possible 2 network tests, and that sentence alone should tell you how the first network test did. Now, over the weekend, we got our first look at Elden Ring Nightreign, a 1 to 3 person multiplayer Elden Ring game that felt more like a mod than an actual installment from Software. However, just because it felt like a mod doesn't mean I had a bad time by any means, or that the game was a bad experience. I, for one, am very excited to see From Software branching out and trying new things within the world of their IPs like Elden Ring. Now, with all that being said, the network test didn't go as smooth as they intended it to. From what I understand, if you were on PC, there were massive problems with even getting into the game or connecting to the servers for that matter. And speaking of servers, rest in peace PlayStation Network, because their main servers were down at probably the worst time ever, and PlayStation players, from what I understand, couldn't even get in the game. But that's why they do network tests, to check how the game would perform under pressure and make sure that the multiplayer aspect of the game was running smoothly, which we saw needed some work. Now, I'm going to give my perspective based on being an Xbox player. My experience with the network test was really great. I had no connectivity issues, I found a group usually within 15 seconds, and everything ran incredibly smooth on my end. I was relieved, and it allowed me to get an accurate representation of what I would experience during the actual release on May 30th. Now, even though I had a great connectivity to the game servers, the game isn't without its hiccups or questions, and it left me with more questions than I would have liked after the network test had finished. I was able to play about 9 hours in total of all the different tests. In the time, I experienced the 4 characters that were released to us, and each one had their strengths and weaknesses, which made each one very frustrating to play or incredibly fun. In order of who was the most fun for me, I would have to rank them as Wilder, Duchess, Guardian, and then the Recluse. I think that Wilder was the most tarnished, if you want to call it that, when it comes to classes, and other classes were fun, but the Recluse seemed like it took way too long to get up and running, and considering this game was all about speed, you really need somebody who can get in and get into the action quickly in order to level up as fast as possible. That being said, there definitely is a place for the Recluse on every single team. It's just much more of a support at the beginning. However, when it came to my personal favorites, as I said, Wilder was definitely up there, and Duchess was another class that was easy to get up and running quickly, as they could output a lot of DPS and didn't have to rely on FP. Overall though, when it comes to the classes, they had something for everyone to try, and each character offered different strengths and weaknesses as your team needed them to push through Limbo. Now, when it comes to the gameplay loop of what you experience in Elden Ring Nightreign, I think there was some stuff they did really well, and other things that left me questioning if they're going to be at release in May. First off, some of the things that I was not a fan of. I didn't like how you couldn't land your Spectral Hawk anywhere on the map. It seemed like it wasn't even going to allow you to get the challenge that you wanted if you wanted to jump right into fighting some of the bosses and drop right on top of a castle. I understand why they did this, because they want you to start small and work your way up big, but for those people who wanted a challenge, this really didn't seem like it gave you a lot of control as to how you started your play. I also didn't understand the purpose of the caves or the mines being in Limveld at all. My thought process behind this was that usually it took too long to get through, and the reward at the end wasn't worth the time spent getting to it. They can also be a death trap for teams who are not managing their circle timing correctly, so in my experience, the teams that I was with typically stayed out of them entirely. I think out of the 9 hours that I had played, I think I only went inside of one of those caves one time, and as I stated, it just wasn't worth it. I also wasn't a huge fan of when someone left your party and your world was scaled for 3 people, it stayed scaled for 3 people, and it didn't let anybody else join. Now, I'm not sure how that would work, considering a person who would have joined in would have probably been level 1, but regardless, having your world not drop down to scale with 2 players instead of 3 definitely seemed rough and way more of a challenge. Now, the last item I wasn't a fan of was the fact that after killing the Night Lord, which was definitely a really fun thing to do, was actually met with a little bit of disappointment. We were only rewarded with relics. It seemed like a very missed opportunity and really didn't give a sense of accomplishment or a reason to keep playing, knowing that the relics was the only reward you were going to get for a 45-minute game loop. Now, I know this is just a network test and not the whole game, but it really was a turnoff to get through your 45 minutes of hard work and coordination with random people only to be rewarded with relics that would boost your stats of your Nightfarers for your next round. I would like to see the Night Lords drop armor, weapons, anything along those lines, including the relics, because it would make your entire 45-minute session worthwhile. But with all the things that I wasn't a huge fan of, there was actually a lot that I really enjoyed about Elden Ring Nightreign, so prepare for the glaze. First, let's start with the gameplay. how it felt, how it looked, and how it performed as a whole. I loved what seemed to be brighter graphics and updated weapon models for Nightreign. I loved the urgency you felt as soon as you dropped into Limveld. It felt like you had never enough time to get what you needed when you needed to get there and move on to your next castle or ruin, and I really loved that. I loved the loot system as well, and I found that having the random chance of getting a purple weapon or great consumable to help you on your way through Limveld was really fun and gave you a sense of urgency to loot everything you possibly could. The mobility was also top tier and really added to the fun that I was having in Nightreign. The fast run, the wall climb, both were welcome additions to my experience and made the game a lot of fun when it came to exploration and quality of life. As far as the mini-bosses go, I liked that certain enemies would drop a white, blue, or purple rune in which you could either get a random perk or a sorcery to follow you around. Having a great weapon and then also an infinite glintblade flanks was super fun and a little bit overpowered. I also enjoyed the perk where you get the starfall to follow you around to damage your enemies and help you clear smaller mobs. Also, I know that we aren't talking about the actual boss fights here, but I wanted to mention this as it applies to the bosses as well. But reskins didn't bother me at all. I went into the game knowing that it was going to be a spin-off of Elden Ring, so I expected reskins of enemies that I had fought before and was totally fine with it. Continuing with the things I liked about Elden Ring Nightreign, I loved playing with people. I had always played Elden Ring alone and never bothered summoning people in past FromSoft installments, but playing a game like Elden Ring I love with other people who love the game was a lot of fun, and I didn't know what I was missing until now. But with all that being said, having people playing with you can cause a little frustration when they're going in different areas and you are constantly losing your teammates trying to find them on the map. But that was a small issue and not really worth mentioning as a whole as something that was a problem. I found the majority of people that I played with were incredibly happy to share gear, drop items, and play as a team to accomplish the 3-night cycle as fast as possible. Now when it comes to the Night Lord boss type, I really liked it. I felt that it was an engaging fight and it relied a lot on teamwork to accomplish. The area was incredibly cool, the boss design was up there with some of the most fun bosses I have fought in From Software games, and the boss had some really cool mechanics moving in and out of 1 to 3 bosses, which I thought was incredibly fun. However, my one and only hope for Elden Ring Nightreign on release is that every single one of the Night Lord bosses is a unique boss. I don't want any reskins of previous Elden Ring bosses that we've seen, as I feel like that would really take away from the draw of getting to the 3rd night and seeing and fighting a brand new boss type. And if that was the case, I feel like that would be a massively missed opportunity on From Software's part. But overall, I think that if FromSoft can nail the Night Lords, this is going to go a long way in allowing people to overlook some of the smaller issues that they may have with the game on release. After all, FromSoft is known for amazing boss fights, and if they continue to deliver that with a bunch of new assets for the Night Lord bosses, then I feel people would be very happy with what they are presented on at launch May 30th. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is the lack of fear that I had over the circle closing in on us. The circle didn't demand that I care about it, as I could usually heal through it regardless of what night it was. In my opinion, the circle needs to instill fear into people to never be inside of it. The circle of fire just became little more than annoying once you leveled up. And if you needed something, you could always run back into the circle and grab it with little problem. It may be too much, but it would be really cool if the more time you spent in the circle, the game would actually take a level instead of your HP. Either way, I think it's something they need to look into for launch in order to make the game just that much more interesting. Now, I am sure you all have similar experiences if you play the network test, and I know for a fact that I didn't cover every little thing in this video, but I would love to hear your thoughts and your experiences down in the comments below. What did you like? What do you think they should change? And what are you most excited for? From everything I saw on Twitter, there was a lot of people who were really upset about the direction From Software is taking Elden Ring Nightreign. And in my opinion, only time will tell how popular or unpopular Nightreign is going to be with the current player base. All I know is that I had fun playing it, and if you have a squad of 3 that you know and can communicate with, you are going to have an absolute blast trekking through Limveld. That being said, I'm not sure how long the gameplay loop is going to last and keep people's attention unless they bring out some new maps and whatnot as the game cycle continues. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching until the end of the video. Make sure to subscribe on your way out, as it helps push the YouTube algorithm farther and helps me out a ton. So with that being said, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.